Hey everybody, welcome back to Sweatpants BI. It's Sean here. Today I wanted to spend some time talking about one of the most commonly used visuals in Microsoft Power BI, the line chart. Line charts and bar charts are probably going to make up 95% of visuals that most people are going to put in Power BI reports because they're very common. They're very generalizable to a lot of different common data visualization situations. Most people understand them really well, and that makes them really, really flexible for a lot of different situations in data visualization and reporting. That said, I use a lot of line charts in my report, and I actually find myself using kind of behind the scenes a lot of tricks to make those line charts really stand out compared to just your regular basic line charts where you just dump some categories or measures into the line charts and hope for the best. I use things like DAX-driven data labeling. I use things like dynamic measure selection. And I have people messaging me all the time on LinkedIn saying, Sean, your line chart looked really cool and it had some features that I didn't know Power BI could do. So, what I wanted to do was just dedicate, a good chunk of time to just drilling into not necessarily some too advanced techniques that you can use with line charts, but definitely some techniques that I use day in, day out to make my line charts in Power BI, really go to the next level. And I wanted to share those techniques with you. So thank you for tuning in to Sweatpants BI. We're going to talk about line charts today. Let's go ahead and get to it. So the data set that we're going to be using for this demonstration is just my personal Spotify data. I built a class for Udemy earlier this year. I needed a huge data set that I thought would be fun to play with for a class. I requested the data from Spotify. They sent it over. I've got about 7 or 8 years, I think, of streaming data in this data set. But for this demonstration, I'm just focusing on 3 years of data, 2019 through 2021. If you look at the data set, it contains, the different albums, artists, and songs that I listened to, and the amount of minutes that I spent listening to music, which is the most important aspect of this data for this tutorial. And so if you go over to the line chart that I created, it just shows the total number of minutes that I spent listening to music for each month in the range from January 2019 all the way to December 2021. So 3 full years of data. The problem that we run into with line charts is that it can be really, difficult to use Power BI's out-of-the-box data labels and formatting options to call out the most important parts of this line chart. You're going to have to know a little bit of DAX. You're going to have to know some DAX tricks in order to get more out of this. And what I mean by that is if you go to your formatting options for the line chart, and if you just turn on data labels and call it a day, that's great. You're probably labeling things that would make sense to label in this line chart, but chances are you're also labeling a bunch of data points that are just kind of noise, especially in something like this specific line chart. I'm probably not interested in calling out every single month of data. When it comes to data viz and when it comes to building Power BI charts, we want to be very deliberate with everything that we label and everything that we call out. So for something like this, maybe I'm most interested in calling out the month when I listen to the most music. In this case, just literally eyeballing this, you can see here's the tallest peak, January 2021. Maybe I'm interested in calling out the month that I listen to the least music, which, scrolling through here, it looks like it's probably July 2019. Not really seeing anything that looks lower than that. Maybe you're just interested in calling out the most recent month in the data, which of course, as I just said, is December 2021 for this. Or, if because this is January 2019 to January 2022, maybe you're interested in specifically calling out how your listening habits changed during the COVID-19 pandemic. I know that, from about the time that I was sent home, from my employer to start working remote during COVID, you can literally see that my music listening habits immediately started increasing around March 2020. And if I wanted to just call out, how my listening habits looked, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, let's call it through May 2021. I know that that's probably very debatable as to what the height of the pandemic was. Not trying to get into that, lots of different valid answers, but just for this demonstration purposes, I'm gonna say maybe I want to call out my listening history from March 2020 through May 2021. What are some techniques that I could use to call out different important takeaways from this line chart that shows, how much time I spend listening to music? Well, I'm going to walk you through some techniques to do that and really deliver it well in a Power BI report. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn off data labels. Don't really need that for now. And I'm going to go ahead and scrunch this over a little bit. I'm going to make it larger at the end of the demonstration, but for now I kind of want to put my line chart over here because I need a lot of space to start working on my DAX. Personally, I am not a huge fan of writing a lot of DAX measures within the context of line charts, bar charts, what have you. I almost always write my DAX in the context of a table. It's just easier for me to sort of spot check that things are working the way I want them to work. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and grab my date column from my date table, which in this case, I'm using a column that I wrote called month year. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the date hierarchy by clicking on the caret and making sure that I have month year selected. This is what I'm using over here. It just contains my months and the years so that I can, have a nice, clean, highly readable x-axis on my line chart. And the main measure that I'm using here, this blue line, is a sum of the total amount of time that I spent listening to music. So I'm just going to sum that, and I'm going to go ahead and make that as tight as possible. And for my first measure, I'm going to try to grab the maximum amount of time that I spent listening to music. And this is the most complicated DAX that we're going to be writing today because it does require kind of understanding how DAX works based on the fields that you're using and the interactions in your data set. So I'm going to walk through this one step at a time. I'm first going to start with just the same measure that is already in my table, the sum of my minutes spent listening to music. I'm going to go ahead and drop that in there. You can see, the total down here indicates the total amount of time that I spent listening to music in this 3-year window, about 111,000 minutes. I listen to a lot of music. So I'm going to go up here and start making some adjustments to this. What I want is I want to create a measure that will identify the maximum output of minutes listened for any given month. I want to get to a place where I can easily call out this 6,024. So what I want is I want to create a measure that will iterate through all of my month year values, sum up my minutes listened, and return the highest output. And for that, I'm going to use a function called MaxX. MaxX, if you look up here in the tips that it gives you, it wants you to put a table or a column, something that it can iterate over, and then it wants an expression to return the maximum value for whatever given, data element or field you're using. And in this case, I'm going to use my month year column from my date table. I'm going to go ahead and commit this, and you'll see, I've just saved this measure. Not a thing happened. Everything is still exactly the same. All of my minutes listened and my max listening values, they're all still equal to each other, all the way down to the total. What you can do to get the correct output here is you can go ahead and wrap your sum minutes listened in a calculate, and it's going to go ahead and preload or kind of pre-aggregate the number of minutes listened before MaxX starts evaluating these values for any given month year. So pay close attention to my total down here and what changes after I add calculate in front of sum minutes listened. Now it's giving me 6,024, which is exactly what I want. I want this value to return the maximum aggregation or the maximum total across all of my months of listening to music. So I've got the right output here. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a flag that will always pull January 2021 so that I can highlight it. This flag is going to look something like this. I'll call this max flag, and if sum minutes listened, in other words, this column is equal to my calculate max listening function for all selected months, then return a 0. And if it's not equal, or return a 1. And if it's not equal, return a 0. So let's go ahead and look through here. I've clearly done something wrong because I'm getting 1s everywhere except for 0. So let's go ahead and back up real quickly. The mistake that I made was I added month year here instead of shutting down my date table. Now it's working correctly. So I made a typo. So let's go ahead and back up so that I can show you the most important part of this new flag calculation, and that is calculate max listening over all selected values from my date table. Now, notice that what I end up with is I end up with a measure that is evaluating 6024 for everything in this table, because all selected is keeping this measure from evaluating any fields that I'm giving it from my date table, in this case month year. So since this measure is now ignoring month year instead of filtering by it, which you can see the values here in my original max listening measure are being filtered by the different month year values. When I add all selected, basically the measure starts ignoring this field, which is how I end up with 6024 for all values here. So now let me go ahead and back up and rewrite this, because what I want is if my minutes listened is equal to my max flag, I want to call out that value. So if my sum minutes listened equals my new max listening value for all selected dates, then return a 1, and if it's not, return a 0. Now I have 0s for all other months, but where my measure evaluates to the maximum amount of time that I spent listening for a given month, I've got a 1. That's all I need. This is literally going to set me up for everything else that I'm going to show you in this tutorial. So since 1s and 0s aren't very useful for this line chart, instead of 1, I do want this thing to actually return the total number of minutes listened. And for everything where it's 0, I just want it to be blank. So now I have 6024 here, blanks for everything else. You can go ahead and format that and add a comma if you want to. And notice what happens when I drop that max flag into my line chart. I end up with a dot, a single data point, in other words, a line that contains only one data point resulting in a marker. I end up with that on my line chart, which is calling out my maximum value, which is exactly what I wanted. You might notice that my line chart is, a little bit cut off here, or at least the marker is. You could write a measure to dynamically adjust your y-axis value here. You can see where you added a function or conditional formatting to your maximum range on your y-axis. I'm just going to hard code this for now, just for our demonstration purposes, so that that dot is not cut off. But there we have it. There's our maximum value. The great thing is once we have our core DAX written, we can recycle this for other applications. So I'm going to go ahead and copy my max listening measure, and I'm going to create a new measure. And you can probably guess where I'm going with this. I'm going to call this min listening, because this is going to be the month where we spent the least amount of time listening. And instead of max x, I'm going to use min x, or minx. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Going to make sure that that's working correctly. If you need to double check it, since there's a lot of different things going on now in this table, you can always go to your minutes listened and sort top to bottom. 1,384 seems to be my least amount of time in July 2019. That corresponds with what the output is here. And so now I just need to grab my max flag measure. I'm going to copy that, change it to min flag, and make sure that anything referencing max is changed to min. I'm going to go ahead and drop that into the table, and great, I've got exactly the same thing here now for my min flag that I have for my max flag. And I can go ahead and drop my min flag measure into my chart, and I've got a new dot here for min, got a dot here for max. The next scenario that I want to play with is, what if I want to call out just the last data point in the line chart? No problem. I'm going to repeat a very, very similar process, but I'm now just going to flag the last month instead of the highest or lowest data point. So let's go ahead and create a measure, and we're going to call this max date. This is going to be one of the easier measures that we write in this tutorial, and it's going to be max date value for all selected values in our dates table. You can see here that everything goes through December 2021, so we're expecting this max date field, or measure rather, to return December 31st, 2021. That's great, but we're not quite ready to call it a day yet. Since I'm kind of running out of room, I'm going to go ahead and delete some of the measures that are already working so that you can more easily focus on the date measures that I'm creating here. The reason that we want to go one step further is that we don't want to just use max date. We run the risk of ending up with a measure that just contains the amount of time that we spent listening to music on December 31st, 2021, instead of for the entire month of December 2021. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new measure, and I'm going to call this max month flag. And it's going to look something like this, since we're using our month year field in the x-axis of our line chart. What we want is we want Power BI to go through every single month year value here. And if the selected value, or in other words, the given month that is being evaluated, in this case, December 2021, if that is equal to lookup value, because we're going to need to look up the correct month year. If the month year is equal to the date that is equal to our max date measure, in other words, we want to look up the month year that December 31st, 2021 belongs to, then return a 1, and if not, return a 0. Does look like I've got an issue somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, there we go. I meant to say if selected dates month year equals lookup value, then return a 1, if not, return a 0. Now as we scroll through here, you can see I've got zeros for all of the months that do not contain December 31st, 2021. And if I scroll all the way to the bottom, I can see that December 21st is flagged because that is the month year that contains the, or that is equal to the month year when we look up that value based off of our max date of December 31st, 2021. Long way of saying, now we have a flag for December 21, the same way that we were able to flag the maximum month and lowest month in the other measures that we created here. So, I'm going to literally repeat the same process that I've already run through twice, because ones and zeros aren't really helpful in visualizing on our line chart. I'm going to replace the 1 with some minutes listened. I'm going to replace the 0 with blank. I've got 2733, which corresponds with the 2733 when I hover over my line chart. I'm going to go ahead and format that correctly so that it's got a comma. I'm going to go ahead and drop that into my line chart. And now you can see I've got 3 different things called out in my chart here. Everything seems to be going pretty well. The last scenario that I wanted to run you through was my COVID-19 range scenario, where instead of highlighting individual data points, I'm actually highlighting a range of data points within our line chart here. And this is probably the easiest step that we have to do, as long as you understand the logic. So this COVID-19 range flag is going to just call out a specific portion of our minutes listened line here, this blue line. And in this case, it's going to range from, I want to know if the minimum date being evaluated in this line is greater than or equal to this date, 2022-03-01, and the max date being evaluated by our line chart is less than or equal to 2021 May 31st, then 1, else 0. And let's see how this COVID-19 range measure is evaluating. You can see that as soon as it picks up on the month that March 1st, 2020 belongs to, I start seeing zeros, and that runs all the way through our range until our dates exceed May 31st, 2021, and then they revert back to zeros. Again, I'm just going to replace this with minutes listened. Everything that I'm not interested in becomes a blank. It immediately filters my table and gets rid of everything that I don't need. I'm good with that for now. I'm going to take my COVID-19 range measure, drop it into my line chart, and you can see immediately that the COVID-19 range portion gets called out. So I've got a lot of stuff in my legend up here that isn't particularly useful because I've got so many measures here. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn off the legend for now. And what I'm going to do is to sort of tie all of this up and create a great user experience based on these different insights that we created. I'm going to create a way for the user to cycle between, the month that we listen to the most music, the month that we listen to the least music, the most recent data point, and the COVID-19 range. I want the user to sort of control how they consume this information. So to do that, I'm going to pose all of these different scenarios that the user could interact with as questions. And I'm going to manually create a table here that sort of walks through the questions that they might be interested in answering with my line chart. So there are 4 questions that I have in mind, and I want them sorted in a very specific way. And my first question, if you'll remember, the first scenario that we ran through was highlighting the maximum value. So in which month did I listen to the most music? The next one is just the inverse of that. In which month did I listen to the least music? And how long did I listen to music for the most recent month of data? And the last question is, what did my listening habits look like during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic? And I'm just gonna, because I have set the boundaries on this pandemic, and anybody who's jumping into this may not know how I've defined the pandemic, I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure that I tell them right at the beginning that I'm defining that as March 2020 through May 2021. And I'm going to call this table, let's see, I'll call it question table. No reason to overcomplicate it. Let's just call it question table. And once Power BI has rendered that table, it's going to appear at the bottom here after play history. Here are my questions. Here's the sort. You can see that by default, the questions are being sorted alphabetically. That's not how I want them. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on column 1, which I should have called like question or something. And I'm going to go up here to my sorting options, and I'm going to specify that I want column 1 to sort by my sort column, obviously. That immediately updates the sorting to 1, 2, 3, 4. In which month did I listen to the most music, least music, most recent month of data, COVID-19 range. So let's go ahead and get rid of sort. Now that everything is in the right order, let's go ahead and turn this into a slicer. Let's go ahead and format this so that the background is gone. And let's go ahead and change this by clicking on the little caret here and turn this into a drop-down slicer. And then I'm going to go ahead and just kind of position this thing where I want it. Next, I'm going to just, go through my slicer formatting options. I'm going to go to the background. Since this is kind of hard to read, I'm going to make it a white background. I'm going to change the font to Den, which is my favorite font. I'm going to go ahead and move this into position. I'm going to make sure that anybody opening this slicer can fully read every single value. I'm going to turn off my slicer header, and I'm just going to make sure that this is as centrally aligned as possible with the text in my background saying, tell me about Sean's listening trends. That way the user can come in here, they can open up the different questions that this line chart can answer, and I'm going to go ahead and change the slicer settings to single select, because basically the user should only be able to answer one question at a time the way that I currently have this configured. If we allow them to multi-select, it could cause some issues. So we're just going to make this single select. And now we need to create a toggle measure that will allow the user to change which measure is being evaluated among our flag measures based on what they've selected in the slicer. Super easy to do. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new measure, and we're going to call this toggle. And the logic for a toggle measure is going to be strictly tied to what our user has selected in this slicer. So I'm going to say if selected value, and I'm going to go to my question table. I could call column 1, but I don't want to have to reference these long text values for these questions every time. So I'm going to be using my sort column, where all I have to do is say if the selected value in being evaluated by this slicer equals 1, which corresponds with my first question, in which months did I listen to the most music, then I want you to return the measure for max flag, which is this data point. If the selected value for my question table sort equals 2, I want you to return this data point, which is the month that I listened to the least music. If selected value sort equals 3, I want you to return the last data point over here, which is max month flag. And if selected value equals 4, I want you to return my COVID-19 range flag. So now I can go back to my line chart, and I can go ahead and get rid of all of these other measures, and I'm just going to use my toggle. I'm going to put that there. You can see that immediately a dot appears for in which month did I listen to the most music. And if I change it to in which month did I listen to the least music, we should see that dot change so that it's over here now. And if I select how long did I listen to music for the most recent month of data, we're going to see that dot move over here. And if I select what did my listening habits look like during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, now it's going to highlight that entire range of data points over here. So now everything's working brilliantly. We just need to, change up our formatting options so that the most important parts of this line chart are standing out each and every single time. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my markers, and I'm going to go to my minutes listened measure, which again is the light blue line kind of running through this entire visual. I'm going to turn off my markers for that, and I'm going to leave them on for my toggle, and I'm even going to increase the size a little bit to make it super obvious what's being called out. If you want to turn on data labels, you can. Obviously, I don't want data labels on for everything, so for minutes listened, I'm going to turn them off. For toggle, I'll leave them on. Again, since we've got a range of values, this is probably more data points than I would recommend having data labels turned on, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to let this ride this time and turn on my background. I'm going to set this to about 30% transparency. I'm going to look for a shade of blue that will work in the context of this visual. I'm going to change my values. I need a white text that's going to really pop. There we go. That's not looking half bad. Again, everything is super busy, and that's, not something that I would typically recommend. We could get around this by using a lot more DAX, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to leave all those data labels on so that you can see if I'm asking in which month did I listen to the most music. There's my new data point and data label. If I change it to in which month did I listen to the least music, there's my new data point and data label. And we have a dynamic line chart full of, different tricks so that the user can come in here, know exactly what they're trying to answer, and immediately get, a visual representation of the solution to that question without having to take a very, very complex line chart with lots of data labels and try to figure out for themselves what the most important things are that they should be looking at. And honestly, when it comes to line charts, this is just the tip of the iceberg for really cool things that you can do with DAX. I'll be honest, I kind of wrestled with exactly what I was going to show you today without getting too carried away. But I mean, line charts are something that I have to build all the time. Super, super common Power BI data visual, something that can get really, really complex and cluttered if you're not careful. Like if you have way too many lines, way too many data labels, it is so easy to have a line chart get away from you and become very, very complicated and just look really, really difficult to read for especially someone who's very new to the data that you're presenting in your report. So I hope that these techniques are just going to give you a couple of tricks for making sure that you're labeling what's most important in a given data visual and that you're really calling out the most important parts of a line chart or a trend, what have you, so that your users can immediately pick up on your line chart and know what they're supposed to look at, and it'll make it even easier for them to walk away with the right findings or the right insights from that line chart. So I hope you found that useful. Honestly, a few months from now, I see myself probably revisiting this in some sort of similar fashion to even walk you through more tips and tricks to really make your line chart sing. But you can see this is a fairly straightforward application of some line chart tricks, and it still took me a long time to get through all of them. So the sky's the limit. If you've got really cool tricks for how to make your line charts really pop or how to do really cool things with line charts, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Let me know. In the meantime, thank you so much for checking out another tutorial on Sweatpants BI. I'm Sean Chandler. Can't wait to see you in the next one.